Today on Ag News Daily.
Yeah, we've done something a little different this year. So are you going to burn more gallons of propane? Absolutely. But does it cost you any more money? No, it'll probably cost you a significant amount less.
Good. Happy Friday, August 29th. This is another edition of the weekly Ag News Daily podcast. Delaney Howell joined today with Michelle Stangler as Tanner is on his way home from the Farm Progress Show. And it sounds like it was a perfect week to be in Decatur, Illinois this week, Michelle. And we're going to be talking about all things Farm Progress Show later on here in the program.
Yeah, it definitely feels like fall college football, like Tanner mentioned last week. Iowa State won, and my Badgers won last night. So it's definitely full force into football and sports this fall.
It certainly is. It's getting a little crisp outside. I like it. And the outlook here for weather is going to stay mostly dry through the southern plains and Midwest. And we're going to see maybe some rainy patterns beginning to shift east into the Delta. The Canadian Prairie faces hot, dry conditions, however, so I know that's increasing the risk of wildfires. In the southern Midwest, dry weather is starting to take a toll, however, as cooler air is hanging around into next week, with only scattered showers expected, but most areas remain pretty parched. There is very little rain in the forecast for most of the Corn Belt for the next 2 weeks, with significant parts of the Mid-South, Delta, and Eastern Corn Belt entering a flash drought this late summer. And the crops are, of course, needing another drink to get to the finish line here this time of year. That lack of moisture is stressing crops, especially in the southern and eastern Corn Belt, where some yield losses are likely despite the milder temperatures. Meanwhile, the central and southern plains remain an active pattern. A stalled front has already brought scattered storms, with more expected before it shifts south. But beyond that, the rainfall looks limited for much of the Corn Belt over the next 2 weeks. The Delta and Eastern Corn Belt are already slipping into a flash drought, and with little chance of meaningful rain, crops will need a late season boost here to reach that finish line.
Well, the USDA's latest crop condition report showed some progress this weekend average to the 5-year average. Corn is rated 71% good to excellent, unchanged from last week. Progress is near average, with 83% in the dove stage, 44% dented, and 7% mature. Soybeans, though, hold steady at 69% good to excellent, with 89% setting pods, both in line with the 5-year average. Winter wheat is near complete at 98% average for this time of the year, and spring wheat is 49% good to excellent, down 1% from last week, with 53% harvested, also near the seasonal norm. What will harvest look like? That's definitely a conversation these past few weeks with multiple reports.
And we're probably maybe 3 to 4 weeks out from harvest here in central Iowa at the Grote Family Farms. We're having that conversation here at our household, I know for sure. And weather is going to be definitely the determining factor here. Thinking maybe we're going to have a wet harvest this year. Knock on wood, we don't necessarily want to see that, but that is maybe what we're thinking here as of right now. But the Midwest annual crop tour, of course, wrapped up last week to really give us an indication of what they think yield might be as it's coming out of the fields. After analyzing crop data from the tour and other sources, Pro Farmer projects this year's corn crop at 16.2 billion bushels with an average yield of 182.7. That is significantly lower than what USDA put out on their August estimate, which was nearly 189. Crop tour leaders say conditions looked strong overall, but weather and disease remain risks heading into harvest. Chip Flory, who led the western leg of the tour, noted that both corn and soybeans have shown resilience, and he said that crops, quote, aren't without risk between now and the end of the kernel and pod fill, but both have done some heavy lifting to build good yields. For soybeans, Pro Farmer estimates production at 4.25 billion bushels, with a national yield of 53 bushels per acre, right in line to USDA's August estimate, which came in at a 53.6. So while the numbers point to a solid crop, Still, a lot depends on how weather and disease pressure play out here over the next few weeks as we head into this final and very significant stretch of the growing season.
Now, like mentioned, we did cover a lot of those specific states' conditions last week on the podcast, but something interesting shared later in the week was when Lake Acre Eastern Leg leader of the Pro Farmer Crop Tour says he was impressed by the state of Minnesota, stating the state was really impressive, and continued, "We've only ever had 2 states that average over 200 bushels on the tour, and one of those was Illinois in 2024, and now Minnesota this year. Biggest yields they saw all week." He also thinks the West just looked really healthy on corn and the beans saw more disease pressure. The East was really dry and they looked forward west on the eastern side. They stumbled upon quite a bit of disease, and he thinks that is one of the big stories of last week's crop tour. Unprecedented was a term he used to describe the amount of southern rust seen in cornfields they visited, so we'll continue to see what those diseases look like as we prepare for harvest.
And as we talked about with Arlen Suderman last week, a lot of that has already been factored into the markets. So we're going to need to see some fresh news to see any sort of a last-minute rally here heading into harvest season. But as we take a look here at some different headlines, the Department of Health and Human Services has confirmed for the first U.S. human case of New World Screwworm. While concerns have centered on potential harm to the cattle industry, Oklahoma State veterinarian Dr. Rod Hall says it is more likely to appear in people or pets than now in livestock, at least in the short term. It's something newsworthy we haven't shared on the podcast recently, Michelle. This case poses no risk to the farm sector, according to a USDA official on Tuesday, and currently there are no restrictions to move livestock. The patient, who lives in Maryland and had recently traveled to El Salvador, has fully recovered. State veterinarians were notified by local CDC last week, and health officials say there's no evidence of transmissions to other people, pet, or livestock at this time. Colin Woodall, CEO of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, said there was a human case in the United States last year in 2024. Previously, there was one back in 2023 as well. We also know that one happened back in 2014, and all of them have been very similar. These were individuals who traveled out of the country that had New World Screwworm, brought the larva back in with them, and then when the pain got unbearable, they went to seek treatment, and then the CDC was engaged. It was identified, and those larvae were destroyed. That just sounds like a nasty thing to deal with overall. The case was confirmed August 4th, but not publicly reported to the CDC until August 24th, also raising some concerns from the cattle industry. RCAF USA CEO Bill Bullard criticized the lack of disclosure, saying independent livestock producers depend on federal agencies to alert them quickly about foreign pests that could threaten U.S. herds. So getting a lot of pushback there, but good to see that that person has recovered. And yes, when you hear the word larva, you just think, ooh, that does not sound good at all.
Yeah, it's something we've been following every week, so we'll continue to follow that. But the Federal Reserve's 9th District, based in Minneapolis, reported that while weather has been favorable for crop production, low commodity prices and high operating costs continue to squeeze farm incomes. In the Fed's second quarter ag credit survey released earlier this week, 91% of agricultural lenders said farm incomes declined from a year ago, with many citing grain prices as a major concern. Weaker cash flow led to a sharp rise in loan demand, while loan repayments dropped and more loans required renewals or extensions. Farm spending also slowed, with lenders reporting reduced purchases of capital equipment and household goods. Interest rates on farm loans edged slightly lower but remained elevated, while cropland values were mixed and cash runs slipped compared to last year. The financial strain, though, is reflected beyond the 9th District as well. A separate rural mainstream index survey from Creighton University found 6 in 10 banks' CEOs supported a Federal Reserve rate cut at the September meeting. That came as the index fell below growth neutral in August, with bankers worried about the economic impact of low ag prices and ongoing trade tariffs. And there is certainly a lot of trade news this past week.
There certainly is, and we will get to that here in just... the next story. I spoke too soon. The senior Chinese trade negotiator Li Qinggan has been reported on to have traveled to Washington, D.C. this week to meet with U.S. officials, a United States government spokesperson said to the Wall Street Journal earlier this week. The visit follows sharp words from China's ambassador, who told a soybean industry event in Washington, D.C., that U.S. protectionism is damaging agricultural cooperation between the two nations. The tensions come as both countries agreed this month's latest tariff truce for another 90 days. Existing tariffs remain steep, with 30% on Chinese imports to the U.S. and 10% on U.S. goods headed to China. For agriculture, the impact is especially sharp. Chinese buyers have largely avoided U.S. soybeans, which now carry a 23% tariff, leaving American farmers struggling with fewer export opportunities. Mike Steenhoek, the executive director of the Soy Transportation Coalition, says that a serious blow because China is an ideal customer. He points to the country's massive population, rising incomes, and strong demand for pork, which requires soybean meal for feed, and widespread use of soybean cooking oil. Those factors have made China the single most important export market for U.S. soybean growers. Also of note, U.S. tariffs on India officially doubled this week to 50%, taking effect as planned following a failure to reach an agreement to postpone. However, some of the largest sectors of Indian exports to the U.S. are exempt from tariffs, most notably pharmaceuticals, electronics, and energy-related exports. Continuing on the trade front, we also know that agricultural groups are largely praising the new U.S.-European Union trade framework that was announced on August 21st. The deal ties tariffs on European vehicles to EU action on lowering barriers for American farm goods. Under the agreement, the U.S. will keep a 27% tariff on European cars until the EU passes legislation to reduce duties on the U.S. exports such as tree nuts, dairy, fruits and vegetables, seafood, and pork. Once that happens, U.S. tariffs on EU vehicles will drop to about 15%. The EU has long held a $17 billion agricultural trade surplus with the U.S., exporting $29 billion in products last year, while U.S. ag exports to Europe remain stuck near about $12.5 billion annually, so certainly a trade deficit there. Dairy producers say Europe's protectionism has cost U.S. farmers billions, and the National Milk Producers Federation and the U.S. Dairy Export Council called the framework a long overdue step to tackle entrenched barriers, pointing to a $3 billion dairy trade deficit alone. Meat producers are also welcoming the framework. U.S. Meat Export Federation CEO Dan Hallstrom said the inclusion of pork and bison, along with commitments to streamline sanitary certifications, is encouraging. And National Pork Producers Council President Dwayne Steitler added that the specific mentions of pork show progress toward easing tariffs and non-tariff barriers in the U.S.-EU trade. So overall, some really positive sentiment there coming out from folks all across the ag industry.
Well, in another piece of news, corn growers are stepping up efforts to combat rising mycotoxin risk by expanding the scope of a key research initiative. What was once the Aflatoxin Mitigation Center of Excellence will now be known as the Mycotoxin Mitigation Center of Excellence, as announced by the National Corn Growers Association late last week. The broadened focus goes beyond aflatoxin to include vomitoxin and other harmful compounds before they create a bigger problem for U.S. corn. Mycotoxins are toxic mold byproducts that can lead to rejected grain loads, reduced prices, and lost market access, costing corn growers an estimated $1 billion every year. The updated center will drive research into real-world field risk, testing methods, resistant traits, and management tools. It will also coordinate industry-wide strategies to protect the value of U.S. corn and invest in solutions across the supply chain. The National Corn Growers Association says the center will remain grower-led and research-driven, building on partnerships with the USDA, universities, and state corn groups. NCGA has also launched a national coalition to rally the broader industry, underscoring just how costly and widespread mycotoxin risk can be across the corn value chain. So looking forward to what some of that research will come out of that facility.
Well, in some consumer news, the USDA's latest food price outlook projects grocery bills will keep rising in 2025, but at a more typical pace. Overall food prices are forecast to climb 2.9% this year. Prices at the grocery store are expected to increase just 2.2%, while restaurant and food service prices will rise faster, up 3.9%. Looking ahead further, the USDA's Economic Research Service predicts food prices will grow more slowly in 2026. Overall food costs are projected to rise 2.2%, with grocery store prices next year up just 1.2%, and food away from the home up 3.3%. In the short term, prices are still shifting from month to month. From June to July, USDA says grocery prices fell in 8 categories, rose in 6, and stayed steady in 1. Beef, pork, veal, and fresh vegetables saw swings of more than a percentage. Eggs and fresh fruit dropped by more than 1%, and pork prices jumped by about 1.3%.
Additionally, when retail prices for any product reach record high levels, the demand usually plummets quickly, but U.S. beef appears to be the exception to that basic rule of economics. Retail grocery stores' prices for beef skyrocketed and showed no signs of descending, but demand hasn't softened. A new report from CoBank, released earlier this week on the 25th, says the allure of beef, even at high prices, is likely the result of several factors currently shaping consumer buying behaviors. The all-fresh retail prices surged by 9%, hitting $8.90 per pound. CoBank says improvements in beef quality and the increased availability of premium-grade retail cuts at retail have played a big role in driving demand. The U.S. beef industry is producing a much higher quality of product today than it did 30 years ago, and Brian Ernst, leading animal protein analysis, says access to high-quality beef has never been better, and American consumers have developed a taste for it. So a lot of interesting things happening on that consumer news front.
Well, as we talk about supply on the cattle side, cattle and calves on feed for slaughter in U.S. feedlots with 1,000 head or more has totaled 10.9 million as of August 1st. That's down 2% from a year ago and marks the lowest August level in 8 years, according to industry sources. That report came in close to pre-report estimates at 98.1%. State-level trends showed some mixed results, where we saw northern feeder areas posted gains compared to 2024, while southern feedlots fell well below last year's placement levels. The drop in the south is linked to the closure to the U.S. border to Mexican feeder cattle imports, largely due to New World Screwworm. Looking at major states, Texas placements were 75% of last year's total, Colorado 76%, Nebraska 98%, and Kansas and Iowa posted increases at 102 and 118% respectively. July feedlot placements totaled 1.6 million head, 6% below a year ago. So, Michelle, as we were just talking there, even with a tighter supply chain, beef prices continue not to seem to be affected here. Demand continues not to seem to be affected.
Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned earlier in today's episode, we are sharing a lot from the Farm Progress Show this week. We've got the latest of what some of those new product launches were, where agriculture companies often unveiled that and new technology for farmers. So Delaney, why don't you kick us off at some of the highlights from this year's show?
Well, certainly Farm Progress Show, you think about the place to be Commodity Classic and Farm Progress Show really are two of those shows every year where we see new technology, new equipment coming down the pipeline. That certainly was the case this year as well. Case IH is expanding their lineup of equipment and technology. Highlights include this year for Case the introduction of its most powerful tractor yet, the Steiger 785 Quad Track, and the return of the Farmall M. At this week's Farm Progress Show, Case IH is showcasing additional launches including their Farmall A and C models, as well as the RB6 variable chamber round baler aimed at improving productivity for both livestock and cash crop operations. The brand is also unveiling a wide range of solutions at Farm Progress Show designed to maximize uptime, simplify operations, and improve overall productivity and profitability.
Another one was Alliance Tire unveiled the world's largest agriculture tire, the IF 1400 45R32 CFO AgriFlex 372 at the Farm Progress Show. Developed in partnership with JMN Manufacturing, the tire delivers record-breaking, they say, load capacity with a 207 load rating and a footprint designed to reduce soil compaction, ideal for the company's new grain cart.
Fendt is showcasing its next-generation high-horsepower tractors and its first-ever stack-fold planter at the 2025 Farm Progress Show this week in Decatur. The company unveiled the 1000 Vario Gen 4 tractor alongside the new Optimum planter, highlighting innovations aimed at improving efficiency and productivity, they say, for modern farmers.
John Deere also announced that its entire line of Tier 4 engines is now approved for B30 biodiesel, increasing the previous limit from B20. That was pretty interesting to see as well.
And Kloss had a big show this season as well, unveiling several new machines for 2025. In California earlier this year, the company introduced 4 new Jaguar 1000 series forage harvesters, the 1080, 1090, 1100, and 1200, offering horsepower options from 850 to 1100. Kloss also announced updates to its Lexicon 8000 series combines. The new 8500 model, available in wheeled or tracked versions, delivers the same 506 rated horsepower as last year's 8600 with 549 maximum horsepower. Meanwhile, the 8600 model receives a 50 horsepower increase, moving it into a Class 9, and the 8700 gains 20 additional horsepower. All Lexicon combines, including the 7000 series, will now be powered by MAN engines, reflecting Kloss's ongoing focus on performance, reliability, and efficiency for, again, the modern grain operations. That's a lot of power in that machine.
Yeah, quite a bit of new things that were happening at this week's show. And one announcement that I'm really excited about from this week's Farm Progress Show came from the Propane Education and Research Council, which replaced diesel generators at the show with propane to power clean, efficient cooling systems across the grounds. Our own Tanner Winterhoff caught up with Mike Newland of the group in Illinois, the council's director of agricultural business development. Mike's passion for this work truly comes through. So let's take a listen.
Hanging out with an old friend of the podcast and of mine personally. Excited to bring Mike Newland with PERC back onto the podcast. Welcome back.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Remind the listeners, what does PERC stand for?
Propane Education Research Council. So the folks that are listening, we're a nonprofit. Think of us like the corn growers or the soybean association. We're a checkoff program for the propane industry.
And remind them what your role is.
So I wear a couple different hats. Director of Agriculture Business Development. So what does that mean? That means I work everything in ag. And then I also take care of the commercial mowing markets and the off-road markets. We sell a lot of propane into the off-road space, especially in the flooring and concrete industries.
That's not two industries I thought you'd bring up at the Farm Progress Show.
How about that?
Yeah, it's kind of neat. It's so universal as a fuel.
Yeah.
That it can be across the board.
And especially, once you get inside, it's really the fuel of choice for obvious reasons. We don't have the emissions problems that some other folks have during contained environments.
If these pulling tractors were propane, we wouldn't have to keep dusting the tabletop off. with the soot that falls down. But it's always excited to get caught back up. What you guys have going on at the show. So let us know a little bit about what's going on right now.
Yeah, we've done something a little different this year, and I guess that's why we like the opportunity to talk about it. Our organization on a show like this, I feel like we can kind of get lost. I mean, it's a big show, a lot of big companies, and we just don't have those types of budgets. So we're always looking for unique ways to make a big splash, if you will. This year, I think we found something that makes sense for us and gives us good opportunity to talk about opportunities for ag professionals at home. So we're actually sponsoring and provided generators and fuel and propane tanks for the main stage area, which is where they do the daily live TV show from. So Max Armstrong and Mike are down in that building. And then also in the media tent. So I figure if we take care of the media folks, we usually get some pretty good press. So our generators are down there. They're running nonstop. We're powering the air conditioners that take care of those two spaces.
Absolutely.
And after Boone last year, I thought that was a great idea. This year, I woke up to 50 degrees.
74 right now.
I know. It's still lovely inside those buildings, but yeah, Mother Nature's taking care of a lot of it. Or I guess maybe we could take credit and we say we're cooling the entire Midwest with propane.
Yeah, it is. It's been a beautiful day at the show. Should be a beautiful day tomorrow. Thursday might get a lot more use.
Yeah, I understand that could be the case. So, but if that happens and you're at the show on that day, by all means, stop down, take advantage of the free air conditioning.
But what a neat way, like you said, to take care of the press, hopefully get good media out of it. But beyond that, it's a live demonstration of how propane is clean.
It is. Well, a few different things, and I don't know. I think agriculture kind of gets our fuel. 800,000 farms have propane on them. So I'm in a pretty unique spot in that I lead a market for the organization that kind of gets who we are and what we can do. But we're also highlighting power generation in all markets. And we only get, if there's a new confinement building barn, we're only going to got a 50-50 shot with us or diesel. And I think a lot of people default to high horsepower and they immediately think diesel. And we've got generators well over a megawatt running all over the world. And we can do some big things horsepower-wise with propane. And that's really what we wanted to show off. We got a 300 kW generator down there running those 4 air conditioners, and it's just singing along, purring along.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked on multiple occasions. Just the reliability of propane is second to none.
Yeah. And especially if you've got a backup situation for power, you don't know when that's going to run. You don't know how long the fuel's going to sit there. It's an ideal fuel, especially if you've already got propane on the farm. You can tap into it, and then you're always turning that tank over anyway.
Yep.
You run a diesel generator, it might sit there for a year plus, and other than maintenance starts, it may not run at all. And that's not a great situation for when the power really does go out and you do need it.
And I know it's always been fun when Delaney and I get to talk to you, but then when I talk co-hosts on Farm for Profit, that there's uses on both of their acreages and their farms to where that backup and having it turn on when it needs to turn on has been extremely important.
It is, and we're seeing more and more of that. If folks want to do a little research, Department of Energy dropped a really cool report on July the 7th, I believe, talking about the grid, talking about the instability of the grid, and talking about all the power plants that we're getting ready to retire and all the new uses, the AI uses that are really intense for electricity and what that grid looks like in 2030. They've got kind of a grim outlook, and they're talking like 10x the power problems in 2030 that we've got today. Well, 2030 is not very far out anymore.
I was just doing some simple math, and it's pretty close.
Yeah, so, I mean, you start taking, I'm sure the coal plants are coming offline, and we're just not adding enough. And for folks who don't pay attention, AI searches on the internet take about 10x the power to do versus a simple Google search. So every time, you're creating a cool little meme on one of your AI platforms, it is intense for the electricity demand, and we're seeing more and more of that. Everybody's using it, and I do too. So
Our team uses it
absolutely,
religiously. It's a
absolutely.
tool that's made us most efficient. I know that it's used across our audience base, and it's a convenience factor,
Sure.
but there is a cost.
Yeah. And we're seeing some of those projects, those data center projects coming our way as well. At least we're getting the opportunity, and those are, you know, dozens and dozens of generators for the data centers. So if they go offline, it's got to be ready immediately and be ready to run full time until they can fix the issue. So
Yep.
it's an interesting market. It's an interesting market for all of us, and then we get into some other very specialized things in the power market, if you will. Combined heat and cooling systems. So if you've got a high electrical demand on the farm, and you can also use that waste heat in an efficient way, we might have some really cool systems to talk to you about.
Yeah, because I know the conversations we've had about how efficient it is, right? Being able to put it to work for you. But I didn't think about it in the alternative crops industry. This is used a lot on fruit and vegetable side of things when you involve a greenhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. We're running it for heat, CO2 enrichment, all those types of things get used in the greenhouse space. And yeah, it's a great fuel. And I think everybody, if you've got diesel around, and I'm guilty too, I'm used to diesel. You think, we're giving up BTUs, and you are. It's not as dense of a fuel as diesel fuel. There's nothing else in the world like it. Diesel is really efficient. So are you going to burn more gallons of propane? Absolutely. But does it cost you any more money? No, it'll probably cost you a significant amount less. And the equipment, because we don't have DEV systems, we don't have all the sensors, all those things that want to break and not allow that piece of equipment to run correctly aren't on a propane generator or a propane system in general.
It's just such a flexible fuel source.
Yeah.
We've talked about the clean.
Yep.
I know I can't say the phrase I want to say, but it's clean and it's reliable.
Yeah.
There's just so many uses. I know we get to usually cross paths at Husker Harvest Days. It'll be a couple of weeks, probably within a week or so of this actually airing as an interview. And a lot of our irrigation friends are super happy for their propane power plants too.
We sell hundreds of irrigation engines every single year on propane. It's, we're fairly small in market share in that space to electricity, except all those problems we just talked about and the cost of electricity. Everywhere I live in Ohio, Western Ohio, our rates are going up again. So I think it's the second time in 3.5 years our rates are going up. So we are no longer at a disadvantage to electricity. Even in the remote middle of the country where all of us live, who used to have cheap power, we no longer have cheap power, and it's never coming back. So I've told everybody that deals in agriculture and the propane industry, do not hesitate to stop on a farm that's got an electric pump on it, run an irrigation, and have a conversation, because I think we've got a better mousetrap for them.
Yeah, it is. It's fun to see the demonstration. I can't wait to come by the media tent. We've been so busy today, I didn't even make it there.
Yep.
But I will make it a point to stop by.
Please do. Yeah, and if I'm around, I'll take you on a quick little tour behind the fence and show you what we've got. I do want to give some credit, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
A couple of the people that have helped us with the demonstration, Evergreen FS here locally provided the tanks and the fuel for us, working with us on fuel. And a really cool company, Ohio-based. I'm not just saying that because they're Ohio-based, but Ed Parker at Ohio Temp Heat and Air probably has the best, most diverse fleet of propane generators in the country. So they brought those out for us just specifically for the show.
Well, those are two very good shout outs. Appreciate that as always. If our listeners want to learn more about propane and the universal use it has, how do they do that?
Go to propane.com. If you're interested in purchasing a new piece of equipment on the farm, by all means, check us out, especially because we've got a rebate program, propane.com/PFRP, the Propane Farm Research Program.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm glad that you shared that. I didn't know about that, and so did our listeners. So thanks again for taking the time to share with us on Ag News Daily. Always appreciate catching up.
Great seeing you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again for Mike for sharing our time and for Tanner for sharing a lot of interviews. We're looking forward to adding those into our show these upcoming few weeks. But Delaney, what's happening with the markets this week?
Absolutely. Well, we saw on Thursday, weekly export sales from the USDA showed the biggest week for the 2025-2026 soybean marketing year so far at 50.4 million bushels. However, soybean sales cumulatively now only total 266 million bushels. So in comparison, what does that number mean? We are down 28.3% from the same time last year. Or again, another comparison, 53.7% below the previous 5-year average pace for this time of year. Notably, due to a lack of Chinese buyers, there have been officially 0 bushels of soybeans sold to China at this point. And for context, we had previously sold 106 million bushels of soybeans to China at this point last year. On the other side of the sheet, 82.3 million bushels of corn sales, bringing our cumulative 25-26 marketing year total to 739 million bushels, double last year's pace at this time, and continuing to narrow the gap with 2021's record pace. Demand is strong on the corn side, now trailing by roughly just 20 million bushels, or about 2.7%. And what's more impressive is that 0 bushels again have been sold to China, who has been, again, a top buyer or driving the record pace 4 years ago that we saw. Instead, we're seeing massive demand from a wide range of trading partners, including Mexico, who was a top buyer this week, purchasing roughly 24.5 million bushels. Looking at supplies, the updated drought monitor this week showed 11% of U.S. soybeans are now experiencing some drought, up notably from 3% at the start of this month. And August, as we talked about earlier in the show, is one of the most important months for soybeans as they fill out pods here for this final stretch of the growing season. Will this be enough to see some sort of a final bump here in the marketing year? Time will only tell, but that is kind of a quick look at the headlines here as we wrap up today's show, Michelle.
Definitely a lot of things happening in agriculture, but soon it'll be September. Any fun weekend plans?
That's right. It's Labor Day weekend this weekend, so markets will be closed on Monday. We'll see a long holiday weekend, and might be interesting to watch today on Friday how traders are potentially shoring up positions as we head into a new market month and new trading month here as well. But no fun plans for me, Michelle. I honestly keep forgetting it is Labor Day weekend. So what about you?
Well, I know that there are some county fairs wrapping up in Wisconsin, so I might head to one, but just trying to relax with that Monday. So it definitely flies by. I can't believe we're now getting into fall.
Fall is here, and we are excited to continue to stay in the cab with listeners this harvest season. You can find us across every major podcasting platform and YouTube, of course, and find us on every major social media platform as well. But with that, Michelle, what do you say we let the people go?
Let's let them go.